Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Goliath Technologies webinar series. My name is Thomas Charlton. I lead the team here at Goliath Technologies, and I'm joined today by Brian Diamond, who is the founder and CEO of LANStatus. Before we get into introductions, just a little bit of housekeeping. Please submit any questions to the chat box, and we will address them either during the presentation or at the end of the presentation. At the end of the presentation, if we don't answer all the questions, we'll get to you on email and respond. We'll also send you a copy of the recording. So by way of introduction, Brian has been in the Citrix ecosystem for about 31 years. His company provides Citrix remote monitoring and management services. They have a NetScaler specialist designation. Brian, in fact, is a NetScaler expert and contracts with Citrix directly in some of their high-touch accounts. In addition, they have other broad partnerships beyond just Citrix, with Microsoft as a silver partner, VMware consulting partner, iGel partner, and an HPE GreenLakes partner. Now, the reason that's important when you're delivering Citrix remote monitoring and management services is because many of the times issues that happen with Citrix don't have anything to do with the Citrix stack, but all of the other ecosystem technologies around it. So Brian's broad base of experience and that of his company gives him the ability to provide a successful end user experience over the last, I believe LANStatus has been in business for 20 years on its own, right, Brian?
That's right, 20 years last month.
So why don't we jump right into it? You know, the managed services market is a large market. Maybe we can frame this dialogue and conversation around Citrix remote monitoring and management. The managed services marketplace is scheduled to grow to $275 billion by 2026. Up from 150 billion in 2020. So it's a large market, but Citrix managed services, remote monitoring and management services, is a unique subset. So maybe, Brian, to start off, maybe the first question for you is, you know, how do you look at the overall market relative to Citrix managed services versus just overall generic managed services? How do you describe that?
Sure. Well, like you said, managed services is a very large market as it is today, but managed services providers tend to be all-encompassing. They are looking to obviously outsource your infrastructure or the management of your infrastructure, the storage, the networking, the hypervisor, and all the pieces and parts in between. And when you look at some of the statistics out there, roughly 25% of the overall IT budget is spent on end user computing, and Citrix in that end user computing space. So it's a big chunk of it. When we look at the Citrix remote management, we take out or carve out just those pieces that are related to the Citrix infrastructure and that silo within an organization and do the remote management and monitoring of just that stack.
Okay. And Brian, why, in your opinion, is there such a demand right now for Citrix managed services?
Well, so Citrix has been around for a long time, a little over 31 years. And people have been getting certified and trained on the technology over the course of those 30 years. And roughly, we say Citrix has about 400,000 customers. And, it takes 2 to 3 IT people to maintain a Citrix environment. So that's a little over 1 million Citrix specialists that are required to manage all of those environments. Now, unfortunately, over the last 30 years, Citrix has only certified about 50,000 employees or technical staff. And they have some specialists that are out there. But when you start looking at the people who were trained, say, 25 years ago, or 20 years ago, which are included in that 50,000 number, we've got a lot of stale skill sets, a lot of old skill sets, and as compared to the demand, which is about 1 million people versus 50,000, that's where this market really, shines for us.
And so, Brian, pivoting to let's say that somebody in the audience is looking for Citrix monitoring and management services, and they want to engage an organization like yours, what are some of the most common questions you come up against when you're first engaging with someone? You know, most of managed services, the promise is around operational efficiencies and reducing costs, and I'm sure that brings up some interesting questions when you're dealing with clients for the first time.
Sure, and it's interesting as it depends on who we're talking to within an organization. Usually we're starting off somewhere in the middle IT management, and they're looking, and there's usually some challenges, but they usually come and ask us, so, what's going to happen to our staff? What's going to happen to the people that currently work here that maintain our environment? Tech people are always worried about outsourcing and managed services as being a way that they're going to get replaced within the organization, and that's actually not the case. Most times we're added on as an adjunct to the existing IT staff, and that makes their existing IT staff actually able to spend time on things that really matter. The other thing that people come up or ask us about is how to sell this to upper management, because someone has to pay for all of this stuff. And upper management they don't really understand why Citrix is so complex and why their existing staff can't handle it themselves. And so we work with them in order to, kind of frame the conversation around the specialty skill sets that are required for a Citrix specialist, and so that they can sell it up. So it's kind of a selling up and selling down, to the people conversation.
Okay. And so in that sort of paradigm, you go in, you start to speak with people. How do you define the roles and responsibilities? So with Citrix remote monitoring management, you're a complement to the current IT staff. What are the lines of demarcation? How do you assign roles and responsibilities?
Well, in the old days of outsourcing, we used to do what we would call waterline slides. Everything below the waterline was the responsibility of the provider. Everything that was above the waterline was responsible for, or in the responsible hands of the IT folk at the organization. The most important things to do right now is to kind of define these up front. During our assessment phase, we actually look at an organization and what the skill sets they have within the organization, who knows how to do what when it comes to the Citrix environment. Because there are storage people and server people and application people, and there are things where the organization wants to handle a piece of it on their own. And they want to make sure that their people are 100% vested in the delivery to an end user. Perhaps that's specifically on help desk. And we define these up front, and we separate roles and responsibilities and call out service levels in a shared resourcing model.
So I've heard you say in the past that your services make a IT generalist and a Citrix expert more productive. Can you explain that? What do you mean by that specifically?
Sure. So it goes kind of to the last question that you asked about defining roles and responsibilities. When we go and talk to the IT specialists or the IT technologists at an organization, we find that they're spending a lot of their time with common routine tasks. They're doing basic Citrix maintenance, and they're spending a lot of time doing that. They're also spending a lot of time troubleshooting basic problems or common problems that happen every single day. They spend their time Googling it, and it's taking a lot longer to get the systems back up and running. So we take over that responsibility, not of the Googling. We have a bunch of specialists, and but the day-to-day operations and maintenance and management of the Citrix environment. And that reduces downtime and relieves a lot of stress off of the organization, and allows the IT people that they have today to focus on higher value activities, such as application updates and maintenance, or to focus on one of their other specialties, which could be networking or security, which is a big play right now.
Okay. And you when we've talked about, and I've heard you in calls with clients talk about the fact that, you know, any competent managed services provider has to have the right people, the right processes, as well as the right tools in place. Can you give a little bit of a description of that and why you make that statement?
Sure. So when we looked at our organization and our specialty, which is in the end user computing space, we started off by looking at our own internal people. And our people have years of experience with end user computing, whether that's on the Citrix platform or on the VMware platform. Some, like me, have over 30 years of experience. They're highly trained, they're skilled in or experienced in multiple disciplines. And we've taken these people and we've created highly efficient cross-functional teams. Everybody works together within the organization to assist everyone when there are challenges. And we use tools that are targeted to look at the performance and uptime of end user computing, as well as the underlying infrastructure. When you look at general managed services providers, they do that from we'll call it an overlay perspective, but then they have these silos, and they'll have a silo for storage and a silo for networking and a silo for security and a silo for end user computing. And there's no way for all those silos to really interact and work well together. And so by having our focus be this one space, we're able to, you know, create a highly effective offering.
And Brian, can you take the audience through a couple of examples where you've implemented managed services?
Sure. So, you know,
maybe importantly, sorry to interrupt. Maybe importantly, what was the driver behind them looking for managed services?
Right, and I think that our managed services customers, when we start to engage, they fall into a couple of different categories, and or problem sets that they have. The most common one is that they have staffing problems. They're short on employees, and this we see, you know, pretty much across the board today. You know, one example, we had a healthcare client. They had about 500 employees, and they only had 3 IT staff to support all of those employees. Now, those 3 IT staff had to focus on their, you know, the desk side support, the help desk, the server infrastructure, and the Citrix infrastructure. And like most people that are short on staff, they weren't provided budget to hire more staff. You know, no staff for additional budget, no budget for additional staff, and but they had budget for consulting services to assist them. So we came in and created a staff augmentation model, which developed into a managed services customer, which is a shared model, and, you know, supported them. So their 3 staff can focus on working with the end users, answering those help desk calls, and we took over the server infrastructure and everything related to the Citrix environment.
Okay.
Another example, you know, that, as we say, these are categories, but, you know, I can, you know, specifically look at a customer that was having end user experience issues. As Windows 10 came out, as Citrix updated their VDI environments and gave more opportunity for people to, you know, to upgrade on their own, it created challenges for the end users. End users that used to have no issues whatsoever, now having performance problems. And those performance problems are things like long login times, or they're having challenges where they're seeing artifacts on the screen. They click and drag something and it takes several seconds for it to come back up. And, you know, an end user experience matters when it comes to VDI, because it's not the same as it was when they had a desktop. The other challenge being that, you know, we deal with a lot of hospitals and healthcare, and IT didn't even know that there was a challenge. It was the clinicians saying performance is problematic. The IT people were actually saying that everything was fine because it worked great for them. And their help desk calls had gone down. Well, people just stopped calling the help desk because they figured people weren't going to respond to them. And so we came in and we actually just did a carve out specifically for that Citrix managed services to get their healthcare users the end user experience that they required. Another example, one that we see very often, we talked a few minutes ago about that general managed services provider. And there's a lot of general managed services providers, and a lot of our clients already have a managed services provider that they're very happy with. But that managed services provider is not skilled in the Citrix or VDI stack. And so there was one where we were called by the managed services provider themselves. And we actually ended up outsourcing in the beginning to them. They told the customer who we were and why they were bringing us in to solve a problem in their environment. And what we discussed was that if we are able to take and manage their Citrix environment, relieving their managed services provider from that responsibility, it's a win-win, because they were very happy with the provider, just not with this one specific vertical stack that they needed of the Citrix environment. So we took over that particular area, and it's been a great ongoing partnership.
Great. And so, Brian, what if somebody out there who's listening sees a little bit of themselves in these examples? How do they get started with you, and what's the process look like?
So this is the point where I put my phone number down on the screen and say, call me here with flashing lights. When someone wants to engage with us, we have a well-defined process for engagement. We always start off with an assessment or discussion where we come on site, used to be. Now we do a lot of remotely, but we have a discussion around the review of their existing environment and their existing skill sets. And we try to identify what are their goals and objectives, both as an organization and for the environment, because nothing is stagnant. Everything moves through moves through a cycle of future proofing, right? Which then the future comes and we got to do it all over again. So we then take this and we document the environment. We create what we call an as-is document. This tells us where we started from, and we make recommendations. So in that assessment documentation, we're identifying things as far as, we'll call it a health check. What do we need to do in order to get where the organization wants to be? And these recommendations are based on best practices today and on what the customer is looking to do. Once we all agree on the goals and objectives and success criteria, then we deploy our monitoring agents, and we set up our process definitions for the for the client, and determine who's going to take first call, who's going to take second, and what the escalation procedures are going to be. And then we go on to manage that environment ongoing, providing weekly and monthly reports.
Great. Well, look, during this whole process, we've had people asking questions through the chat, so it's about time we pivot, I think, to get to the Q&A part of the interview. And I thank you for your input and your answers so far, Brian. So this first question, they have a monitoring product deployed currently for Citrix, Brian. Can your service utilize these tools?
Yeah, so while we have our own tools that we deploy into the environment, we can also leverage a customer's tools that they've already acquired. We can set up monitoring rules so that their environment will forward those those alerts to us. We always work kind of in conjunction with the existing help desk staff. Okay,
great. This individual would rather have what they called, I guess, termed a dedicated resource than a shared resource. Do you provide staff augmentation?
Sure. So we have both full-time and fractional staffing available, which we call residency services, and where we can give a dedicated person, sometimes on site, depending on the location, but again, most of the times remote, for that customer. Obviously, the pricing model depends on the type of resource that you're looking for and what their skill sets are. And sometimes our clients will use a dedicated person from us and have a managed services overlay on the backside of that.
Great. The next question is simply VMware Horizon with a question mark, which I'm assuming, since we've been talking so much about Citrix, do you also have the capability to provide the same managed services for VMware Horizon?
Yeah, so our team is highly skilled in the Citrix environment, Horizon workspace, and in Azure WVD, or AVD as it's now called. So whatever the end user computing platform is that's being used, even Microsoft Terminal Services, we have some clients that are using the native client as well.
Okay. In this next question, they said, unfortunately, we have Control Up. Can you work with that tool as well?
Sure. So we work with pretty much every tool that's in the Citrix ecosystem, whether that's Goliath Technologies, Control Up, EG Innovations, and also some custom tools.
Great, great. Troubleshooting is part of managed services. You mentioned that earlier, but this question is around, do you provide standalone troubleshooting services?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So a lot of our engagements start off as a standard troubleshooting engagement. Client calls us and has an issue, and what we're trying to do is get root cause analysis on why that issue is happening. They may have already started to work with Citrix directly, and they want another set of eyes. We can provide a statement of work with some defined deliverables in it, and do that as a standalone project.
Thank you. Next question is, they're expanding their VDI environment and number of users. Can you assist with expansion?
Sure. So it's actually great. It's similar to our troubleshooting engagements, except we actually like it when our clients are telling us they're planning on expanding or that they have some sort of future plans. That way we can get in early and do the design and architecture and then assist them in moving through that process. It's really important, and it's a step that's skipped in most deployments.
Next question is, do you have a service to log on remotely to ensure our environment is up and running on a daily basis?
Yeah, so we have it's application availability. And what we're doing is we're logging into an environment, and we can do that on an hourly basis or once a day. We can do it from multiple locations around the country or the world. And we can provide monitoring alerts if it's up or down, whether we have performance issues in logging in. And then we can actually do reactive services as well if we see that there's a problem.
And so there are a number of questions about this, but I'll just consolidate them into real-time alerting and how it works with their help desk. Again, there were 2 or 3 questions that are very similar.
Gotcha. So real-time alerting. So our tools are going to give us alerts when there are performance issues or an out-of-course event. We have a system down, and that can actually go to both us and to their existing help desk. But when we define our process, we come up with whether we're going to have those alerts go to both of us at the same time, or more frequently it comes to us, and then we enter that into the customer's help desk if they're taking level 1 and we're taking level 2. But it all depends on those roles and responsibilities that we talked about very early on.
And Brian, one last question. We're running up against time here, but let me try to squeeze one more in. And by the way, anybody that asked a question and didn't get an answer, and there are some here, we'll make sure to get you the answers as well as recording to this interview. Brian, what does your monthly reporting look like? So, how do you, for example, show that you're meeting your SLAs or that end users are happy, that type of thing?
So we have multiple types of reports. Some are executive level, which are high level roll-ups. End user productivity types of reports that show how many people were logging in, were they paying attention, were they working on their screen, do they have any kind of ongoing issues at a very high level. Then at a lower level, we can go into what were the number of patches and updates and hot fixes and things that we acted on throughout the month. What people had, specific people had challenges versus a roll-up of, hey, 50 people were great, but 2 had a problem. We can actually say that that the specific user was having multiple issues throughout the month, and those reports come out, and we can do that weekly, and the roll-ups are typically monthly.
Great, great. So, Brian, thank you so much for answering those questions. To those of you that didn't get answers, we will certainly send answers as well as a recording. And Brian, before we sign off, do you have any final thoughts for the audience?
Well, I've been doing this for, over 30 years, and every single customer situation is different. And we have to, look at them as, all unique. Every industry is different. They have different terminologies for different things that they do. And, but one common thread that, runs throughout everything is that end user experience matters. And we really need to look at what the end user sees as a positive outlook for what we're doing. And so if we go through this and the end user experience doesn't improve, then we know that we haven't done our jobs.
Great. Thanks so much, Brian, for your time today and sharing with us your market knowledge as well as expertise. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.